I haven't checked. Okay, good morning. My name's Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. And today's class is on summer pest control, the things we have to worry about in summertime. Number one for us is always controlling ants. Little black ants, you don't want them in your house, but you don't want them in the garden either. That most of the ants that we have are not native here. They came up from Argentina, and they said because there's not much genetic variation among them, they tend to form super colonies in the neighborhoods where all the colonies are the same colony, and they can just run rampant through the. And the bad thing about ants is that, not only are they a nuisance to be around, but their main job in their life is to farm sucking bugs. So aphids, mealybugs, whitefly, scale. You generally don't get those on plants unless the ants are there. So most of these sucking bugs are controlled by other beneficial insects, but the ants chew them away because the sucking insects excrete honeydew, which is mostly sugar water, so it's the ants' food. So the ants protect their sucking bugs. And if you have ants in the garden, you'll have scale and mealybugs and whitefly on your citrus, on your gardenia. You just get all kinds of bugs on your vegetables, aphids all over. Without the ants' help, this time of year at least, the ladybugs and the lacewings and the other beneficials tend to clean them up very quickly. I had a plum tree once that I noticed all the top leaves, top foot of growth, covered in aphids, and there was ants all over the tree. And what I did in those days, we just put a pesticide, contact insecticide on the trunk, which I wouldn't do anymore, but that's what we had in the old days. We just put a contact insecticide on the trunk so that the ants can climb up there. And within 1 week, there's not a single aphid left. I checked, and the ladybugs had totally cleaned that plant up in 1 week. It was just covered in sticky aphid stuff. So the ants are a problem. In the old days, we had ant baits and ant sprays that would last 2 to 4 weeks, but it would only kill the ants that touched it. It wouldn't kill the colony. So those, once they wore off, you'd have to apply it again and again. And most of these poisons that we used to use were nerve poisons. So if you used them a lot, you felt queasy because your stomach was being affected by the nerve poisons. So we haven't used, those have been taken off the market for at least 20 years now, all the nerve poisons that we used to carry. So now the best way to control ants is with a bait. Now, unfortunately, we used to be able to get a bait that was certified organic. And it was a company in Florida, and they were sending them through all the organic farms. But during the pandemic, they just went out of, they stopped manufacturing. So we can't get that particular product anymore. We do have these. Now, this is our favorite, the Amdro ant killer. It is cornmeal bait, which ants like to eat, and it's got a real low concentration of a slow-acting poison in it. This one's hydromethylnon, and the ants can eat this. It doesn't kill them right away. They can take a whole bunch of this back to their colony, feed all their friends and neighbors and queen, and in 3 days they all die. So that's been quite effective. This is one with boric acid in it, and this was the chemical that was in the certified organic. Now, when you certify something organic, you got to spend a lot of money to get it certified, and they didn't bother to do that. So this is boric acid plus a similar cornmeal bait. So generally this has worked for us the best for the last 20 years, but if you use this over and over and over, and you got a real big colony, generally this won't kill 100% of every ant colony there is, and sometimes you have to switch poisons and use one or the other, or use, we don't recommend using both at one time, but use one, and if you still have some ants, use the other one. So there's a few other products out there, but we haven't been able to source them. One product has a sterilizer that sterilizes the queen also with it. So I haven't seen those products locally yet. Been checking. So ants, most important. If you keep the ants out, half the bugs in your garden are not going to be there for very long, at least. They might be there, but they won't be there for very long. So I brought a bunch of plants in, the ones that normally get attacked every year. Being in this business as long as I have, we learned over the years, I learned 40 years ago what got attacked every summer. So with the onset of warm weather, one of the plants we get hit, they always get hit, are the zonal geraniums. Now the other geraniums don't seem to get any bugs. The ivy geraniums, the scented geraniums, the Martha Washington, the regal geraniums. But the zonals, which are, from your grandparents' age, get hit by a worm, moth caterpillar thing that goes, they lay the eggs on the flower buds. I don't see anything on this, but I can see the damage that they're doing. So I see one flower bud, not easy to see, but this has got a hole in the side of it where the caterpillar went inside to eat it out from the inside. So we're starting to get some flowers that have holes on them, holes on the petals, and that's where the caterpillars are eating the flowers. And if you don't control them at that size, they'll get big enough and they'll start going after the leaves too. Here's a few holes in this leaf. So we do have to spray these at least every 2 weeks. Now in the old days, we didn't have anything organic that really worked well. Nowadays, the products we use for this are the products that contain spinosad. So we're real happy to have that. It's the first, quote, organic product that we've ever had that lasts more than a few hours on the plant that will control chewing insects like caterpillars, beetles, green grasshoppers, which are katydids, pill bugs, and a few other things. Plus, they also kill one sucking bug real well called thrips. So spinosad is found in several products we carry. Here's one that called spinosad soap. So in this one, they combine spinosad with soap. Soap itself can kill bugs somewhat. But what it's really helping out is it makes the spinosad stick to plants with waxy leaves better. So like the other product with spinosad is the Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. This does not contain a wetting agent, which works okay on plants with fuzzy leaves like geraniums and tomatoes, but not so good on a waxy leaf plant like a citrus leaf. So when you use this and you've got a waxy leaf plant, we add a wetting agent that's essentially a soap. So this spreader sticker is a type of soap, or you can buy this one with the soap added. This combination is actually a little more economical than when they mix the soap together. This is 7 ounces in a gallon of water. This is 2 ounces in a gallon of water plus 2 teaspoons of the wetting agent. Now you can use like ivory or joy You have to use the right amount. And if you underdo it, well, if there's no wetting agent in the product, what happens is that if you spray it on the leaf and the leaf is waxy, it just beads up. It won't spread out. If you have the right amount of soap, which like ivory, it might be 6 or 7 or 8 drops per gallon of water, then it spreads out and covers the entire leaf nicely. If you add too much soap, it just runs off. It won't stick to the leaf at all. So the wet and right amount of this one is 1 to 2 teaspoons per gallon. And here, usually you have to go on the higher side because our tap water is very hard, which doesn't cling very well. So spinosad, now it lasts for 2 weeks in the sunlight on the plant. Once you mix it with the tap water, you got to use it pretty fast. If you want to keep it in a sprayer like one of these, perhaps if you use distilled water, it'll last longer. Tap water is so alkaline, there's so many chemicals in it that it tends to break down most pesticides pretty quickly. So spinosad is a product of bacterial, it's a byproduct of bacteria that was found in a rum distillery in the Caribbean islands. So it's apparently a chemical that was found in rum. And it's used a lot in veterinary medicine right now because mammals are almost immune to this since we've been drinking it. But I looked at my dog's flea tablet a while ago, and pure spinosad. You feed your dog spinosad, it eats the spinosad, it kills the critters inside its body and the fleas on the outside of its body too, fleas and ticks. So it goes into the pet's bloodstream and it kills all these other bugs. So it's apparently pretty safe. They use it a lot in veterinary medicine now. Spinosad came on the market around 20 years ago. Most lifespans of pesticides are not much longer than that, so we'll use this as long as it still works. But eventually in the future, most of the insects we're trying to kill have been killed off by this already, and the ones that are left will be the ones that are immune to it. So they're already making new versions of this, like in veterinary medicine. I think there's something called Spinotram, and in the agriculture too, spinosad may not be working on large farms like it used to, but for the time being, we love this product. It's the first thing we've ever had you can use on herbs and eat them the next day. I think they just don't consider it a poison. So, to humans at least, to insects, spiders, fish, it's pretty potent stuff. So that is our most important insecticide we use currently. At the nursery, we're using it just about every 2 weeks. Now, the other thing we use a lot are the oils. There's several oils on the market. This is mineral oil made from petroleum. Neem oil is made from plant seeds. And then we have the essential oils that are the newest thing on the market. And these are, stuff out of the pantry: rosemary oil, sesame oil, peppermint oil, thyme oil, cinnamon oil, and garlic oil. And because of that, there's no EPA number on this. The Environmental Protection Agency does not have to know this exists because it's all food-grade material, whereas any other pesticide, the government wants to know what's going on. If we spray it here at the nursery, we have to report that we spray it at the nursery. We have to give a report, whereas if we use this, nobody cares. But the oils tend to kill sucking bugs quite well, especially spider mites. Now, spider mites are real common in the summer. I couldn't find any spider mite. Well, this is Persea mite, which is a different mite that's found on avocado leaves. So you get these what look like spots on the leaf, silvery spots, and those silvery spots are actually little spider webs, and in each spider web is a little colony of Persea mites that are sucking on the leaf. So spider mites are true spiders, just like spiders that eat bugs. Spiders eat bugs. They pierce the bug, inject toxin that liquefies the body, and suck it out. Spider mites, they're so small, they pierce one cell of the leaf at a time and suck out and inject the toxin and then suck out the contents. So your leaf gets mottled looking. On the other spider mites, not the Persea mite, what you'll see on foliage is lots of little white dots where they're just removing the contents of one leaf at a time, and the leaf eventually starts looking gray-green. And because spider mites all spin webs, it gets little tiny webs all over the growth, and it starts looking really dirty. And the plant just shuts down. We always seem to get spider mites every so often on tomato plants. They just turn gray, get covered in webs, stop growing. Doesn't usually kill them. I remember when I was a kid, I had my first tomato plant, totally covered in webs. Couldn't grow at all for a while, but eventually the spider mites disappeared and the plant started growing and producing again. But the oils are the best thing out there. Now, in the egg culture, they don't use oils as much because you have to use a lot of volume. They use these chemicals that are actually cheaper than the oils, but they're not safer, and the oils are still considered the most effective against spider mites that we have. They're also used against scale, mealybugs, whitefly, aphids somewhat. So oils kill bugs just by covering them up with oil, and they can't breathe for a while. So they just suffocate. Sometimes on these larger sucking bugs, we don't get 100% kill. And the one problem we have, especially with aphids, is that aphids are one of the few critters that are known in science to be born pregnant. In fact, they said that aphids give live birth 2 days after they're born. And they have an embryo in their body that has an embryo in its body. They said there's 5 generations born at once with aphids, and every 2 days they can give live birth to another insect that's already pregnant. So if you leave one aphid out there in a week, you got 20 or 30 again. So the oils, now among these oils, the mix of 6 essential oils seems to be a little more effective than the single oils. So, and really the main reason this was developed was for the marijuana industry, because they needed to control mildew, and so oils also control powdery mildew well. Now, just so you know, when we go after powdery mildew, we mix the oil with baking soda. Baking soda on the plant also stops the disease spores from sprouting for a while. But these bugs, it does a pretty decent job, not usually 100%, but pretty decent, especially on spider mites. And this one has been a little more effective against aphids than these two. And this is a ready-to-use version of that. So one of the reasons that, one of the problems they had a few years ago in the marijuana industry especially was that they were using neem on the marijuana plants. legally in Northern California, and their plants wouldn't pass inspection. When they got tested for residue, they found residue, even though they're using certified organic neem oil. And it kind of opened the door or exposed the fact that most chemical manufacturers that bottle products don't clean out their machinery between products. So if you have totally good, clean bottles and totally clean material, but they don't clean out the machines that put it in the bottle, so that all the chemicals get mixed in each bottle from previous things, and it ruined a whole crop of a whole batch of marijuana plants had to be thrown away because they had residue of other chemicals on them. So the industry has got to do something about that for the rest of us to make sure that you have dedicated machinery to dedicated products. But don't know if that'll happen yet. We'll see. But that is an issue with a lot of chemicals. So the oils control some disease and a lot of these other insects, and they'll do a little bit on thrips also. So thrips is the new really bad bug in town. Now thrips are really tiny. You don't normally see that they're around. The first sign of thrips every year is on rose flowers, and you'll see that there is something called the western flower thrip, and it goes inside the light colored roses, white, cream, yellow. When the buds are just starting to open, they lay maybe 40, 50 eggs in there, and all the babies suck on the outer petals of the rose. So when the rose opens, all the outer petals are brown. You can pick them off. The inside looks fine, but if you dump out the rose on a piece of white paper, you'll notice all these little brown bugs walking around. Those are thrips. But now we have a new thrip that attacks everything in the summer heat, the chili thrips. And here's a couple of chili plants that got hit in our nursery. So the western flower thrip just goes into flowers and causes trouble on, say, rose flower petals and on nectarine skin. And the nectarine flowers, when they bloom, the western flower thrips get in there, go after the flower, cause damage to the developing little nectarine in there and cause it to be scarred. But the chili thrips go after all the new growth on roses, on chili, almost anything that's got a lot of new growth this time of year. The chili thrips go after it, and they're like spider mites in that they're piercing and sucking on all the new tissue. So the new tissue just shrivels up. So far, fortunately, the spinosad products have been shown to be as effective against thrips as anything out there, killing apparently about 95% of all the thrips that get hit by this. Again, it's not 100%. So what we do is we'll do this one week and we'll do oil the next. Oil doesn't kill 100% of thrips, but hopefully we get the 5% that the spinosad didn't get. So we alternate at the nursery pretty much every week between the oil, and the oils generally are all certified organic. All three of these products are. And the spinosad is certified organic. And the waiting time on oils is essentially a few hours. I mean, they say a day, but as soon as the oil evaporates, it's pretty much gone. And the spinosads, since it's part of rum, they say you can spray lettuce and eat it the next day. There's a few plants you're supposed to wait a little longer. Peaches, I believe you wait 5 days. But the chili thrip is the number one, has been devastating on roses from midsummer on. All the new growth on the rose just shrivels up from this chili thrip. Chili thrips came originally from India. They made it to California not quite 10 years ago. I think it's about 8 years ago. So Another new bug. Generally, if you grow marigolds, and marigolds can be grown any time of the year, between May and October, we get caterpillars that eat them. So if you're growing, so marigolds are supposed to repel a lot of insects, but they also attract some. So maybe it protects other plants by all the insects get attracted to this than the other plants you have. But they do have an odor, so they are repelling some things. But I remember, 40 years ago, we'd have to spray these all summer long to keep the bugs off of them. Just get these big caterpillars all over them. So marigolds are very subject to that. So are petunias. So petunias, usually in the summer, you start seeing holes in the petals. And it's a similar, I'm not sure if it's the same bug, but they lay the eggs right on the flower buds, just like on the geraniums. So if you examine a petunia plant real closely in the summer, some flower buds, you see little white round globes on them, real tiny things, and you see, okay, that's an egg. You just pick them off if you want, but it's a lot of work if you have a lot of petunias. So they usually get bugs too. And then anything in the cabbage family that you grow in the summertime, like this collard, will get holes in them from the cabbage worms, which are white butterflies and green caterpillars. So we do spray these with the spinosad every few weeks. I mean, generally it takes 2 weeks for a caterpillar to reach a size that does significant damage, or that you actually see. But of course, if you have greens, you don't want any damage on them. So, but on most plants, little caterpillar can get 2 weeks of life, and then if you hit it within its first 2 weeks, then it doesn't get big enough to cause major damage. So right now, the citrus trees are getting hit by the citrus leaf miners. So all the new growth that comes out spring and summer and fall, there's a little moth that flies around at night laying eggs on the new leaves, and the caterpillars are leaf miners, so they tunnel through the leaf, causing it to warp, leaving a silver trail. Now they're actually underneath the silver part of this trail. You can see it winding around, and what they do is when they're mature, they roll the edge of the leaf over and make a little cocoon there, where they pupate and make another generation. So when we used to sell citrus here before we got put in the citrus quarantine, we would spray our citrus trees every 14 days with the spinosad products. Because if we waited 20 days, they'd just be inundated by this bug again. So we know that spinosad lasts just about 2 weeks exactly. Now, if you have at your own home, you spray it once a month, you're not going to see much damage. Even if you just spray it once during the summer, that'll cut down a lot of the damage. But yeah, citrus leaf miner now. This pest is not being controlled in orchards for the most part because it's mostly aesthetic, and it mostly hits new growth, which is mostly on young trees. As the trees mature, they don't put on that much new growth during the summertime, and this bug hits from, we haven't seen it before the first day of summer, and then it hits real hard, right first day of summer. So mid-June, if you spray spinosad, you won't see it, and then it slowly goes away by November into December when it gets cold again. They disappear. And we don't see them at all from January through early June. Here's some old damage from last year. You can see the little trail in the leaf that turned brown, like on this leaf, where the caterpillar ate inside the leaf. So they call it a grade B pest because it's not threatening the crop. Now when this bug first came into California, right around 2000, the natural predators didn't go after it, and it was causing a lot of trouble. It was eating branches. It's like, yeah, the entire tree was gone. But what they found is that 9 of our beneficial insects started eating it, and now it's not quite as bad as it was when it first came up from Central America. Now that other pest on citrus, so that was citrus leaf miner and the spinosad with the wetting agent. So you do have to use this wetting agent on this. If you use this product, you can put a few drops of this in there before you spray it. Now the types of sprayers, just so you know, the sprayers that are most accurate, so these little pump sprayers are quite accurate. They're already pre-mixed in there, everything's very accurate. The things you attach to your hose, and they make sprayers that you attach to your hose, are not so accurate. So we know that if the hose is turned a funny way on, where it's attached, you turn it a funny way up or down or left or right, sometimes the spray curves and we notice that the chemical doesn't come out properly. So we only use it on products that are not highly concentrated, where you have to use a lot of material coming out. So it's still, like the oils don't have to be that perfectly proportioned, because oils always coat the plant one molecule layer thick. So even if it comes out kind of weak or kind of strong, it'll even itself off on the surface of the plant and still work. And this spinosad is not that concentrated, so it's putting a lot of volume into the water. It usually still works okay. But a lot of chemicals aren't suitable for use in hose end sprayers. We haven't used a hose end sprayer for most of our other chemicals for 20, 30 years because they're just not very accurate. So the hand pump sprayers are perfectly accurate. The ones that don't cramp up your fingers as bad are also perfectly accurate. And tank sprayers are also in the same thing. They're accurate also. And the ones with a wand on them with the hose helps you spray upside down better. Whereas with these, you can only spray underneath things when it's totally full. Once it's half empty, it doesn't work anymore. Whereas these, you can spray underneath things quite well until it's empty. In the nursery, because we've got a lot of area to cover, we use a backpack sprayer, and all of these nowadays come with battery powers. I haven't resorted to that yet. I still use a regular pumping type. So this is a backpack sprayer that holds 4 gallons of spray in there, and we can pretty much spray the entire nursery with 1 or 2 fill-ups. And then, of course, with the wand on it, you can spray upside down. The wand on all these are adjustable from a fine mist to a stream. So I can shoot up perhaps about 10 feet up with this one. And the nice thing about this backpack sprayer is it builds up some good pressure. Whereas most of these things don't have much pressure available to them. This one can go over 50 pounds PSI. And pressure alone, spraying things, will knock off a lot of the bugs I'm going after. So, and just so you know, a lot of bugs, if you knock them off the target plant, they have a hard time getting back, especially spider mites. They're so tiny that if they fall off a plant and are on the ground, it's real hard for them to get back up there. And there's plenty of other predator bugs on the ground that eat a lot of the bugs on your plants. So once they're on the ground, they're doomed. They get eaten up by little ground spiders or some other things. So, okay, let's see. One second, I gotta answer the wife. Hi. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now the other thing that we really hate nowadays are the new mosquitoes out there, and there's really no plants that are known to repel them very well. However, there's a new one we're trialing. And that's this one. So this is one of the scented geraniums that there's a number of people up in the canyon who swear by this thing. They said, this one works. This is the one we've sold in the past for mosquitoes, and it hasn't proven to do much, even though it's very fragrant. A lot of people up in the canyon, and Mike Milligan, who was he's a late former retired fire chief up there. He was the one that promoted it up in that area, Mike Milligan. And I saw a picture of his cabin up in the canyon, and he did have a hedge this high of this plant on two sides of his house. So apparently you need a lot of it to work also. So he had maybe 30 foot of this plant. Now I don't have that much to sell. I got maybe 10 plants around. But the geraniums in general, you break off a piece and you stick them in a pot in semi-shady areas for a while, they root. And you can multiply it very quickly. They do, the foliage will grow about this high, and then his pink flowers above that. So it's not unattractive, but yeah, he had a lot of it at his cabin. So, no, it's the fragrance off the foliage. So they bloom in the spring, but the fragrance of the foliage is what's supposed to stop them. Well, this one's a little more piney or citrusy. And this one is, I don't know, it's not unpleasant, but definitely not pine or citrus. I don't know if you can describe that smell. We call it Milligan's mosquito plant, but we don't know the official name for it. We saw it as another grower had it as mosquito shock, the same plant. So we're not certain. I mean, we haven't trialed it ourselves yet, so I might have to set one next to my desk where I'm working to see if it keeps the mosquitoes away. Yeah, different odor. We'll try it and see. Okay, so of course, if you grow tomatoes, you get tomato worms, the big giant hornworms on them in the summer and fall. Now, I used to raise these when I was a kid, and they would not appear until late July. I know if you're inland, maybe the heat brings them out earlier, but this was when I was lived in Pasadena. We never saw them until late July. I guess they wait until the tomato plants are big enough so they have enough to eat. But I mean, these caterpillars can reach 3-4 inches long, just consume entire plants on their third week of life. And the spinosad does a good job on those also. Now, you might be asking about, a lot of the people recommend BT products, Bacillus thuringiensis, to control caterpillars. It has some disadvantages. So BT, which is a natural disease that kills caterpillars and only caterpillars, the problem with it is that it has a short life on the plant, a few hours, before it's no longer effective. And it's got a short shelf life also. So if we don't sell the product out, we've got to throw it away. So they make a new batch of this BT every year. I mean, it's kind of gross how they make it. So they said they get a whole bunch of caterpillars and get them all sick, freeze dry them, grind them up, and throw them in the bottle. So you're spraying essentially dead, diseased caterpillars on your caterpillars, and they all get sick and die. Oh yeah, BT. Yeah, yeah. Monarch butterfly caterpillars seem to be very sensitive to all these products. Yeah, very sensitive. So, okay, another pest that you can get on roses, especially if you have roses near the coast, your leaves start looking like lace. All these little holes in them. So this pest is called a rose slug. It's not a slug related to snails. It's a larva of a stingless wasp that kind of looks like, well, on pear slugs it looks slimy, but the rose slug looks like a little green caterpillar. And I've had people bring in samples to me. You know, they just hand me a leaf and says, well, I can't see anything eating this. And then I point out all the little rose slugs on that leaf to them. They can't see it, but it's right there on their leaf. Now, I didn't check this morning when I picked this, but I don't see any rose slugs on that one. But they're green. They don't move fast. They're not real big, but they'll lace out your entire rose bush. The spinosad does a good job on these. Probably 5 years. Most chemicals other than BT, and there's a few things that you have to not use after a year, but most other chemicals, they say shelf life at least 5 years. So. Up until 10 years ago, we didn't see so much damage on bougainvilleas, but the bougainvilleas are getting hit by caterpillars also. So here's, I don't know if I cut off anything with caterpillars on it. I don't think so. But the caterpillars are now going after bougainvilleas quite well. Spinosad is for that also. Now on this indoor plant, we got scale on this one. Scale is the little black scales you see on the branches here. That suck on the plant, and they excrete honeydew. So what you'll often notice is the leaves get really shiny with little drops of essentially sugar water on them. Now for indoor plants, it's hard to spray oil inside your house. So what we often do is use another product like this, which is the systemic. You just pour this in the dirt, and when you water it, the chemical gets sucked up. It's a systemic makes the sap of this plant poisonous, and it kills the bugs. So the chemical name on this one is imidacloprid. Which is being taken off the market because they got implicated when we had the bee colony disasters, 20 years ago? And because of that fear that everybody had about bees dying, this was noted that it does kill bees that suck on flowers that have this in their system. So they said, we got to get this off the market. This was what made Bayer such a powerful company, because they made the imidacloprid. But here now, 20 years later, they said it didn't kill the bees. The bees were in a natural cycle of, I don't know, bee colonies come and go, it seems. It does kill bees, but it wasn't responsible for the beehives dying. And that's still being blamed. I mean, all the beekeepers know it was a disease that the varroa mites, which are parasites on bees, brought to the hives. So now they're having to kill the varroa mites to keep the bee colonies alive. They said that's what wiped out the bumblebees in the United States, is this varroa mite that had this disease in it was in the bumblebee colonies and wiping them out. Some bumblebees are pretty much gone. The bees are around because the beekeepers treat the beehives, and if they lose the beehive, they can start a new one. There are places where they can buy new queens and get their hive started again. The imidacloprid got a bad name, but it is good not to use it on flowering plants. This is an indoor plant. It's not a big deal. Certain plants outside, like junipers, if they get scale or bugs on them, pine trees, things that don't bloom, this is still used, the chemical is still used on them, but not near flowering plants because it will kill bees. Not all flowering plants get it into their nectar, but a lot of plants do, and a bee gets it, it'll die. Now, just so you know, bees that are foraging in the field are on their last 2 weeks of life. So usually if a bee colony loses its foraging bees, it's not critical because they're making new ones all the time in the colony. But yeah, the University of Washington studied it for a long time. They said imidacloprid, they couldn't find any evidence of it in the hives at all because the bees that die in the field don't make it back. But still, you know, it's good not to use it on certain things. Just use it on plants that don't bloom if you need to use it, because it is the most effective thing we have on scale, mealybugs, whitefly, certain things. It's hard to get around using that. Now, there are other systemics being promoted that don't seem to have the same effect on bees, so slowly switching over to those. Okay, on this nectarine tree, and peaches get the same thing, we had a flush of new growth and it got hit by powdery mildew. So all the new leaves kind of rolled up like that. So we sprayed it with the oil, and now I don't see the white stuff. This is the damage. You can cut the damage off and the plant will be fine again. But we also see the other bug that gets on these this time of year, which is the they call that flagging of the leaves. When you see those, the end of the branch turns brown like that. Here's another sample here. So there's a bug called an oriental fruit moth that has 5 generations every year. 4 of the generation, well, the first generation eats the flower petals right when the peach or nectarine are blooming. The second generation and 4th and 5th drill into the stem tips and consume the soft tissue inside the new growth, which, you know, it doesn't do that much serious damage to this peach tree. However, the middle generation, the 3rd generation, drills right through the stem into the fruit. And you don't see a hole in your fruit at all until you eat it, and there's a worm right at the pit. So it's a maddening little pest. You don't want to see this around. The spinosad products will also control the oriental fruit moth. There's another very similar pest called a peach twig borer. Does the same thing, but its larvae go through the skin of the peach, so you can tell that that there's one in your fruit. You see the hole on the outside, but this one goes right through the stem into the fruit, which is nasty. I mean, I learned how to tell. You pick the fruit, you look down where the stem was attached, you see a little hole going to the pit, you know there's a bug in there, but you don't see anything from the outside. So this one, if you treat it before your peaches get close to being ripe, you'll stop that bug. Now, just so you know, some of the other things we see in the summer that are not bug related. This is a sunburn. So when leaves sunburn, they don't do it on the edge. They do it toward the middle because the edge of the leaf is cooler. The center of the leaf gets hot. Now these leaves sunburn because I did some heavy pruning on the plant. These were in the shade initially, and then when I pruned off the top leaves, these got exposed to the sun, so they weren't used to it. So plant leaves that are, you know, down deep inside, if you expose them to the full sunlight and it's 85 degrees or so, they'll burn like that. This is dryness. You get the brown around the edges and some yellowing going on too. So that's stress from dryness. Now this is interesting. So 20, 30 years ago when we first saw this on our stone fruit, we're going, shot hole fungus. So we'd spray it for shot hole fungus and it would still happen. We thought, must be bugs. We sprayed it for bugs and nothing happened. And then we thought, well, we'll cut it off and just fertilize it good and outgrow it, whatever it is. And then we never saw it again. So this is a lack of nitrogen in the plants. So on this plum leaf, when the leaves are running out of nitrogen, they turn kind of yellow. Now this particular plant was hidden in the back, so I didn't fertilize it this summer or this spring. So the leaves were real yellow and they're getting these red blotches on them and that were falling out. That is a sign of lack of nitrogen in that leaf. Now that I fertilized it, a couple weeks later, it's green back up. But it was kind of hidden back there, so I didn't see it. But this is what we used to get every summer on all our stone fruits, the apricots, the peaches, the plums, would all get these spots on them that would turn red and fall out. And we thought it was a bug or disease. And it turns out just need to fertilize the thing. So that's an interesting one. Now these are figs, and they're both clones of older plants. They're not grown from seed. This one shows viruses in it. So a lot of the old varieties of figs, which may be hundreds or even thousands of years old from Europe, have viruses in them that they've picked up over years, and it makes the leaves kind of mottled. What's interesting about virus is it doesn't like it hot. So now we haven't had our first real bad heat wave yet. In fact, we didn't have any heat waves last year that I can remember. It didn't get much above 90 at all last year. But whenever we get to about 100 degrees, the leaves all lose their mottleness. The new growth comes out completely green because viruses don't like heat. That's why when you get a virus, you get a fever, and the fever cooks the virus out of your body. And the same thing happened with this plants. So in the springtime, we see a lot of this. Sometimes on roses, you get the mottled leaves. On these fig trees, the mottled leaves. And then the virus is cooked out of the plant once we get one heat wave. 100 degrees, gone for the rest of the year. It's not totally gone. It comes back in during cool weather. Viruses like it cool. So now this is a younger plant that was found locally, and it doesn't seem to have much virus in it yet. But it is showing that if leaves on figs stay wet for a long time, they get fig rust. So this is a fungal disease that if it gets real bad, if we have a rainstorm like last year, we had, what was it, 1.5 inches in August? And a lot of the leaves on our fig trees got all these little brown spots, and we're losing a lot of leaves. Of course, the rain stops and the leaves grow back and we're fine. But when we get those summer rainstorms, figs are really susceptible to fig rust. So I have one of our customers who lives here in this neighborhood, and then part of the year lives in the Philippines, told me he's taken our little fig trees and smuggled them into the Philippines. And because they have no winter there, they produce year-round there. But he says if they have a bad monsoon year, they can't get rid of the fig rust and the plant dies. So these are used to a dry summer climate. The Mediterranean climate is dry summer, wet winters, where it doesn't really mess up the figs that much. In the Philippines, because they have no winter, the figs produce year-round, but the monsoons will kill them. A bad monsoonal season will just kill them. Interesting. I will mention weed killers. We don't really sell too many weed killers because I don't really like many of them. But We have worked with this one for a while to see how well it works. This is vinegar 47%. Now the vinegar you buy at the supermarket won't kill weeds because it's only 5%. This 47% stuff, I mean, I've opened this, it'll clean out all your sinuses. It is potent stuff. I don't know why they don't have poison stuff on here. It does say poison. Yeah. So anyway, this, yeah, if you put your hand on this, you don't wash off your skin or for a while, it starts to get real sensitive. You're burning off your skin. So this one, if you use in your sprayer, make sure it's a chemical resistant sprayer. I put this in one of my tank sprayers once, and within a week, all the seals were gone, stopped working. So this is one, if you put it in there and you spray any young growth on any plant, any leaf, it'll burn it off. Unfortunately, it doesn't kill older weeds very well. It'll burn all the leaves off, but they're usually, if they're older weeds, they're pretty strong and they just continue growing. It'll burn off all the leaves on a grass weed, but grass plants are underground and they just poke up new leaves and get going again. But if the weeds are real young, like if you just weed an area by hand and a week later you see all these little green things pop up, this will wipe them out. So it's pretty good for wiping out young weeds. Like after a bad rainstorm, suddenly your yard has got all this green stuff coming up. You spray this on and you wipe them out. Now, the one thing you have to be careful with is this changes the pH of your soil. And if you use it too many times, I would say twice, no problem. But if you start using it 3 or 4 times in 1 year, then the soil gets too acidic to grow certain plants. So don't use it too often. Now our water, tap water, is highly alkaline. So, you know, after a few months of watering with tap water, then this may actually help your soil again, get it more on the acid side. So if you went around once every few months in the summer spraying the little weeds, it'll probably do double duty and get your alkalinity down a bit too. But yeah, it's potent stuff. Now, as far as birds are concerned, birds are easier to scare away than other critters because they're very visual. And the funnest thing we ever used was a blow-up snake. Actually, back in the day, this was like in the 80s, I had 20 fig trees on the side of my house, and it was an aviary out there every summer. So I went down to the big amusement park in Anaheim, and they had this rubber snake that was this big, really realistic looking snake. Hung it up in my fig tree. Didn't hear a bird for 2 weeks. Didn't hear a bird. So this one is a 6-foot long blow-up snake, and it'll scare them away for longer than most other, like the scarecrow owls work for a couple days. The falcon never worked at all for us. So certain other things work mildly. The snake works the longest, and if you keep moving around the yard, keep your neighbors away too. So now up in Napa Valley, they use a scare tape, but they use it differently than most people use it. So they hang it horizontally for like 50-foot stretches. So this string it from post to post, strands of this all across the vineyard. And what happens is silver on one side and red on the other. So the slightest breeze turns this tape from silver to red. And what you see in the Napa Valley is silver and red streaks going across the whole valley, 100 miles an hour, just silver, red, back and forth. It just makes you dizzy looking at it. And the birds hate it. The birds just hate that. When you just hang this straight down, it doesn't do a whole lot. But when you can stretch it horizontally, several strands of it, and there's the slightest breeze, it just, now it is crazy looking. I mean, it just, you know, visually it's not nice to look at that thing just going back and forth all day long. So, but that method of using it is pretty good on the birds. As far as other pests goes, it's hard. We brought this one in like a pop-up tent. It's a net that enclosed things totally. It's only 40 inches high though. So you can't put it in a tree in there, but you can certainly put blueberry bushes or entire tomato plants within it, and it'll keep them out, keep the critters out of there. And it's, you know, it's very light. But they do make bags that you can close entire trees with. If you go through the Central Valley in the summertime, you'll see entire orchards of citrus covered with these gauze bags that lets the sunlight in. Now, just remember that if you cover a plant with the bag, the bees aren't going to be able to get to it to pollinate it. Citrus do not need pollination. They make fruit without it. Figs do not need pollination. They make fruit without it too. There's a few figs around that need a pollinator, but the vast majority of figs don't need any access to bees to make fruit. So the fruit that forms without pollination by bees, you can totally enclose them in that and it's fine. They have entire orchards in California and in Florida covered by a similar gauze. And they found that the trees are actually more productive under the gauze than they were outside of it. It does keep the orchard 5 degrees cooler in the summer, 5 degrees warmer in the winter. And the netting does refract some light onto the north sides of the trees. So the north sides that normally don't get any light at all were brighter and more productive. And they said, I think they said 13% more productive orchard, which is, that's significant in an orchard. So, oh, I brought this plant in because it shows damage from a sucking bug that we can't do much about. So if you look at the leaves on this, they have a white cast to a lot of them, like there. Looks like dried milk. So this is from a bug called the glasswing sharpshooter. Which originated in the deep south, came into California about 20 years ago. And in Orange County, when it came in, it wiped out most of the oleanders in Orange County, which may or may not be a bad thing. So this bug, I didn't bring a picture of it, but it's about this big. So it's actually a fairly big bug when you know, everything looks bigger when you see it in person. But what it looks like, it's got a lizard or alligator head, and then it's got a body that's got wings on it, and it's got feet. Very good eyesight. So when you see this bug, it's stuck on one side of the branch, it's sucking on it. You get close to it, it goes to the other side of the branch. If you get real close, it flies to the next tree. It's a real strong flyer. And if you're ever out underneath a tree or a vine in the summertime, there's no clouds, but you feel little drops on your head, that's it pooping on your head. So it sucks on the plant, consumes some of the proteins in there, shoots out the sugar water, which looks like powdered milk when it dries. So the problem with this bug is it can transmit, it's like an insect on this plant. It's the biggest sharpshooter we have, so it can suck on even trunks of trees. It's big enough to do that, whereas the native sharpshooters are about half the size, and they can't suck through branches. They can only suck on leaves, really. So this is a major pest that spread a disease throughout the oleanders, wiped out, you know, I would say 99.9% of the oleanders are no longer in Orange County. I mean, the 5 freeway that was its signature, was oleanders along the 5 freeway, and they're gone. So this disease that the bug spreads is a bacterial infection, Xylella fastidiosum, and not all plants are affected by it. Like this mulberry apparently has no problems with the sharpshooter sucking on it, but when they have the disease in them and it gets into the branch of the plant, it kills the circulation from the point of attack. So in the oleanders, wherever the bug sucked, the rest of the branch would turn brown and dry up. And eventually it can suck on the whole oleander. So the oleanders were dying to the dirt. They regrew, but the bug and the disease were still around, so this kept dying to the ground, and people just removed all of them. Unfortunately, a similar disease is found on, not the same disease, but a similar acting disease that this bug spreads is going after olive trees and going after purple leaf plum. So if you see a purple leaf plum tree that's got dead branches, that's that disease. You see an olive tree with a brown branch, that's that disease also. There's not much we can do about it. Now, the big concern has always been the vineyards, because in Anaheim we had, back in the 1800s, there was a vineyard in Anaheim that got wiped out by a disease, and they didn't know what it was because no one had microscopes or anything back then. In the 1920s, it turns out it was a bacterial infection that was spread by the local, by the pruning tools that the farmers were using, and by some, just local bugs. So it's called Pierce's disease, and it wipes out grapevines. Wherever they suck on it, you lose that branch. So this bug spreads that too. So when they found out that this bug had made it into California, now, just so you know, the deep south, they don't grow many wine grapes down there, because this disease and bug had wiped them all out. They do have grapes that are down there that are immune to the disease, but they're not usually used for wine. There is one called Spanish, Old Spanish, I believe it's called, that is used for wine, that's immune to this disease because it's evolved down in the deep south where this bug is from. But once this bug made it to California, they said, Mondave sold all their property in California, moved to Argentina or Chile. So they saw the handwriting on the wall. Temecula 20 years ago was totally being devastated by this bug, but they have a way to treat the vineyards that we can't do in our yards. So what they've done is they've taken the imidacloprid, which is a systemic. So this kind of makes, growing grapes not so fun. So they put this in all the vineyards, all the grape plants, either this systemic or a different systemic. It turns out that in a fruit tree, like a grape or like a peach, systemic insecticide is in the upflow from the roots to the leaves. That's the xylem. And that is not connected to the backflow from the leaves to the roots, which is through another circulatory system called the phloem. The fruit is attached to the phloem. The bugs are sucking on the xylem. So in theory, if they put this on a grape plant, it doesn't get into the fruit. In theory, you can put this on any fruit tree and it won't get into the fruit. But I don't trust it. I just don't trust it. But that's what they do. So in Napa and in Temecula, what they did is they've got their grapevines. Of course, they've got hundreds of grapevines or thousands of grapevines, and they put the systemic in every single grapevine in their farm. And this bug, if it has a disease in it, can take one bite only before it's killed off by the systemic. So what they said is going on is they're losing about 1% of all their vines every year, but they're saving pretty much the entire interior of the vineyard by sacrificing a few grapevines every year on the outer sections of it to this bug and the disease. If you only have one grapevine in your house, there's not much you can do. I mean, you have to, if you applied this throughout your neighborhood, then you're protecting your house. And that's about the only way you can do it. I mean, this bug can suck on just about any plant. And it's under biological control, so it's not as bad as it was 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, my entire citrus tree looked like it was covered in dried milk. It was totally white. I mean, it was just nasty looking. In fact, a lot of the plants, they were actually feeding on everything. There were so many of them, but they brought a predator in there that they said eliminated 90% of the population. You can't do 100%, unfortunately, but they got down to 90%. You still, if you walk into any garden, you can find one or two of them. But 20 years ago, it'd be like one or two on each branch you looked at, you'd see a sharpshooter. So, a lot better than it was in the past. Any questions today?
Here you guys use sulfur. What about sulfur for pest control? I know you can't use it in combination with oil.
We don't. Yeah, that should control mildew and some mites and certain bugs.
Do you ever have issues with the oils when it's really hot out?
Oh, that's a good question. So, we don't spray in sunlight if it's above 90. But we'll spray even if it's 95 once the sun sets. We don't seem to get any burning. This oil, so in the old days, and we're talking pre-1980, the spray oils we had were only used on plants with no leaves because they were so polluted that you'd spray an oil on a plant, all the leaves, if there was any leaves on it, would just burn off. They were real contaminated with mainly with sulfur. Sulfur and oil is a bad combination. Since the 1980s, they've really taken just about all the sulfur out of here. So we spray this pretty much any day of the year. We watch the temperature, make sure the plant's not dehydrated at the time we spray it on there. But, they'll have on here, they usually tell you how little sulfur's in it. I don't know if they still do that anymore. Superior type oil, 0.02%. I think that's how much sulfur is still in the oil, is 0.02%, which is really low. And it does have a warning, do not apply when temperature is greater than 90 degrees or less than 40. Now, that's the other thing with oil. So it kills most bugs and insects by suffocating them. The plant needs to breathe too, but the plant can hold its breath for a longer time. But the oil's got to evaporate within a few hours for the leaf to be healthy. So you don't want to spray it either when it's raining, because the rain covers the oil and won't let it evaporate. You can't spray it when it's too cold, because the oil won't evaporate when it's cold. Now, the first time I ever used oil was in the middle of winter, and I thought, now that it's cold, I spray my oil. So I sprayed on my orange tree, and it was 50 degrees. It was like in the 40s at night, and by the end of the next day, all the leaves had dropped off my tree. It didn't kill it, but it suffocated all the leaves, and the leaves just fell off. So it took a year to get the leaves back and a new crop on it. But I learned my lesson. You don't spray it when it's that cold out, because it won't evaporate. So, when it's moderate weather, like today's perfect. I don't know what happened to our heat wave. That's why we live in Orange County. We haven't seen anything close to 100 in over a year now. So I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. I don't know, they say they have all these heat warnings. When I lived in San Gabriel Valley when I was a kid, it was always 95 degrees. It's not anything unusual to be 95 degrees in the summer. It's like I grew up with that. The melted tar on the streets. like why is it so hazardous? Now, anyway, the oils, you have to be careful with the temperature. Not too hot, certainly not too cold, not when it's raining. Any other questions? Now, the baits, I didn't mention that. The ants need a couple hours before you irrigate or after you irrigate to apply this. So when it's super wet, don't apply the baits. They need some dry time, usually in the evening. And that's also a good point. So we don't like to irrigate at night. If the leaves on a plant stay wet for 4 hours or more, there's a chance of getting a disease. If they, like right now, or up until today, it was so warm in the evening, it didn't really matter. But if you keep leaves wet all night, especially the worst one is basil. Basil loves it hot, but if it's wet, the leaves are wet all night, they get this downy disease on them that makes all the leaves turn gray and shrivel up and fall off. And that same disease has been on a similar, same type of disease has been on impatiens and on coleus. So if you keep those leaves wet at night too, they can shrivel up and turn gray and fall off. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.